For decades, we've been pretty obsessed with one question. How can we live longer? But what if that's the wrong question? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the science that says the real goal isn't just adding years to our life, it's about adding life to our years.
Okay, let's just get right into it. We all want more time, right? But I think a lot of us have this nagging fear that a longer life just means a longer period feeling sick, of dealing with disabilities, of basically just being a patient for longer. Is that really the inevitable trade-off for getting older?
Well, the science kind of presents us with two different paths forward. On one side, you have simple life extension. We live longer, sure, but that period of sickness just stretches right out along with it, taking up more and more of our lives. But what if there's another way? That's this idea of morbidity compression. The goal here is to push back the start of chronic illness so far that we squeeze all that sickness into the shortest possible time, right at the very end of a long, healthy, and active life. So what's the big idea here? The compression of morbidity isn't about finding some magical cure. It's a hypothesis, and it's been around since 1980, actually. It says we can delay the start of chronic problems faster than we extend life itself. And what's the result? You spend way less total time being sick over your entire life. It's a total shift in how we think about aging. So the billion-dollar question is, how do we actually do it?
Well, that brings us to one of the oldest debates in science, nature versus nurture. What has more power over how we age, the genes we're born with, or the life we actually live? Let's see what the evidence says.
So on one side, you've got your genetics, right? Your inherited DNA blueprint. On the other side, you've got what scientists call the exposome. It's a bit of a fancy word, but it just means everything else. It's all your environmental exposures and lifestyle choices from the day you're born. It's what you eat, your job, your friends, where you live. It's pretty much the sum of your entire life's experiences.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. A huge study out of the University of Oxford looked at what really predicts our risk of dying. And what they found, well, it's a total game changer. Just look at this chart. Our lifestyle and environment, the exposome, explained a whopping 17% of the variation in mortality. And our genetics, get this, less than 2%. Just let that sink in for a second. This is a massive finding. It tells us that while we can't change our genes, the vast majority of what shapes our health is actually in our control. And don't just take my word for it. The study's lead author, Dr. Austin Argentieri, said it best. This approach gives us the most complete picture we have ever had of what really drives aging. And that picture is crystal clear. Our choices and our circumstances matter way, way more than we thought.
So what specific choices are we talking about here? What makes the biggest difference? The study pointed to a few key things. Stuff like having a higher income, being employed, getting regular physical activity, and even living with a partner. Each one of these, all by itself, was linked to a 20% or greater reduction in the risk of dying. These aren't just abstract numbers. These are real, concrete parts of our daily lives. Okay, so we've established that physical activity is a huge deal. But how does it actually work? How does moving your body protect you on a deep biological level? To get that answer, we need to zoom in. I mean, way, way in. Right down to our DNA.
All right, let me introduce you to your telomeres. These are tiny little protective caps on the very ends of your chromosomes. The best way to think about them is like those little plastic tips on your shoelaces, the ones that stop the lace from completely unraveling. Telomeres do that exact same job, but for your precious genetic code. Now, here's the thing. Every single time one of your cells divides, those telomeres get just a little bit shorter. It's a totally natural part of aging. When we're young, they're long and strong, but over a lifetime, they shrink, and eventually they get so short that the cell can't divide safely anymore. It enters this state called senescence, which is a major driver of what we think of as aging. Which brings us to a really critical question. If this telomere shortening is like a fundamental clock of aging, is there anything we can do about it? And this is where physical activity comes roaring back into the picture in a super powerful way.
The research suggests exercise is like a superhero for your telomeres, fighting on three main fronts. First, it might actually boost an enzyme called telomerase, which works to rebuild and lengthen them. Second, it reduces what's called oxidative stress. You can think of that as a kind of rust on your cells that damages DNA. And third, it lowers chronic inflammation, another big-time accelerator of the aging process. It's powerful stuff.
But look, our health isn't just a physical game played inside ourselves. It's also deeply, profoundly shaped by what happens between us. So let's look at another equally powerful pillar of healthy aging, our social connections. I want you to take a good look at this number, 42%. Just let it sit there for a second. What in the world do you think this represents when we're talking about living a long and healthy life?
Well, that number, it's a jaw-dropper. A recent study found that older adults with high levels of social engagement had a 42% lower risk of dying over a 4-year period than people with low engagement. I mean, that is a massive effect, right up there with the biggest physical health factors we know about.
No, what's so great is we're not talking about anything crazy or complicated here. The study pointed to very specific, very human things. We're talking about volunteering, spending time with grandkids, being part of a sports team or a social club. These were all major predictors of a longer life.
And one of the study's authors really hit the nail on the head. They said that staying socially active is more than just a lifestyle choice. It is fundamentally linked to healthier aging and living longer. It's not just a nice to have, it's critical.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. We've seen that our lifestyle, our exercise habits, and our social connections are all incredibly powerful. So the last question is, how do we pull this all together into a practical game plan we can actually use in our lives?
Well, health experts tend to think about this in 4 stages. Step 1, and this is really the holy grail, is preventing risk factors from ever even starting, like teaching kids healthy habits from day 1. Step 2 is about actively reducing the risks you already have, quitting smoking, starting an exercise plan. Step 3 is managing a condition if it does show up, to stop it from getting worse. And Step 4 is all about keeping the best quality of life you can, even with an established health issue. The big takeaway here is that no matter what stage of life you're in, there are always powerful steps you can take.
So in the end, the science is pretty clear. The power to compress morbidity, to live a longer, healthier, more vibrant life, is largely in our own hands. And that really leaves us with one last, and maybe the most important question of all. If you could add all those healthy years to your life, what would you do with them?